I'm going to focus on work that we're doing most recently in collaboration with Terry Roche in the DEP and link it in a kind of a conceptual way to the assessments that were used in the CERI project, which has its report today. So now, yeah? Okay, so just to give a very quick idea, we're interested in creative production, the ability to produce creative ideas. And this is based on having creative potential. And creative potential, we can be interested in that as a general concept, but in fact, we'd be more interested in how it's deployed across domains of knowledge in subject areas. And this creative potential depends on some ingredients, which are cognitive ingredients like mental flexibility, cognitive ingredients like perseverance or openness trait, affective ingredients perhaps, and environmental ingredients, which might be a stimulating environment. Okay, and these ingredients are going to come into play during the process of creating, which will end up with things that are more or less original. And this process we conceptualize, to simplify, into two big moments: the divergent exploratory part of the process, in which we explore around from a stimulus point, and the convergent integrative part, in which we synthesize in a new way to get some idea, which is the output. There's a cycling between divergence and convergence all along the processing until the person decides they're done. Now, there's been work since many decades on how to detect creative potential. And in our own work, we developed over the years the evaluation of potential for creativity epoch method, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But we also have developed for, let's say, more for older students or high school or adults, that we could measure some of the ingredients directly and help to predict how much they have. Those ingredients predicts how much they can put them into play. And that's a different line of work. Now, in the epoch battery, we put the kid in what we can call a simulated experience. We say, be like a little artist for a moment, be like a little writer, and create. Now, it's not just create whatever. There's constraints, so that first, it helps them to guide their creative effort, and second, it helps us to judge and compare what they're doing. Now, these tasks are organized by domain. And in each domain, like the verbal, the graphic, the scientific, the mathematical domains, there'll be divergent tasks, generate many ideas, and convergent integrative tasks, generate one idea that integrates several elements we give. And part of our constraints are that the same task has to be usable across age and across place, across countries, for example. Even though the scoring is locally done, it's the same task. Now, so that was used in the CERI project, and you can see in the report that it was used as a pre and post measure, among other measures, to determine if the teachers who had tried to deploy creative pedagogy succeeded more or less, because the students went up more or less in the pre to post test creative thinking measures. Okay. Of course, when you come to a student, you say, hello, do some creative thinking for me right now, okay? It's not their, let's say, it's not a normal life situation, okay? So this is always an issue. Now, in our current work here, of course, we continue with our epoch work, but it is really putting the kids in a real creation situation in the epoch work. Now, here, we're interested to go more towards scholastic domain assessments, again, with divergent and convergent thinking, but we have some new goals. We want to have multiple items, like an item bank, like hundreds of variants on each task, that kids cannot predict what's going to come. Even if some take it in the morning, they talk at the break in the schoolyard, The others come, they got a similar task, it's kind of the same task, but it's not the same items. These are highly constrained, which allows us to go to automized scoring on a massive level. So the challenges are different, and you can see how they fit, for example, with some objectives of the DEP, French ministry type of objectives. Of course, they can be used to monitor a system, or they can be used to give kids feedback at the personal level, of course. Now, we've got some we're working on that are for individual students to take alone on a computer platform, and we have some that we'll call collaborative creativity, which I'm going to show you, in which a student creates with another, quote, student. But since we can't pair them with some other student who's more or less good, we pair them with our student agent, who's called GLIPS, who is a sort of avatar type student. Okay, so first, some of these individual-based student creativity tasks in which students, I chose here the verbal domain, but later we are working on mathematical domain, or you could think of history domain, other domains. And so here we're going to have divergent tasks and convergent tasks. So you may know some of these, like object uses. We give them an object and we say, generate as many different uses as you can for the object. And they have, they can type in many different answers in a limited time. Or we give them a word and we ask them to generate free associated things that go with that word. So if you say cat, many say dog. They say mice, they say other things. But as they go more and more in the time frame they have, it gets more difficult to say things, obviously. And so we see that there's a sharp drop in performance over time, and we're interested in that. Then verbal convergent, we give them, for example, 2 words like dog and cat, and they have to give us 1 word that's associated to the 2 others. They generate the 3rd word, but they know in these tasks that they're supposed to be creative. It's no secret at all, okay? In sentence completion, we give them a sentence. For example, Pierre goes on vacation. He prepares whatever, something, and gets out of his car, okay? And so they generate a word, 1 word. They're all being judged against everybody else of their age group. And so how much their word is a rare word is going to give them more points, okay? Now in the collaborative, we have a story task to give as an example here. And in this task, if you don't speak French, I'll tell you sort of what it's all about. We have divided the story creation task, which is a more complex task, similar conceptually to the epoch task in which a child has a freedom to create a story using some characters that we give them, for example. But in this task, it'll be divided into sequences of divergence and convergence. So the task is broken down into a set of subtasks that they go through. In the end, they will have created a sort of storyline which can be evaluated by judges, if we want, for its creativity. But they will have done the task in like 4 parts. So there'll be 1 part where, for example, they need to choose the characters that are in their story. This is a choice with a list, okay? Now, as they make their choice, GLIPS over here is going to make suggestions or ask questions or give an idea of another character because GLIPS doesn't agree with your characters. And so you can collaborate or you can tell GLIPS to shut up or whatever, okay? And so we're monitoring how you interact with GLIPS to measure your collaboration ability, which is another 21st century skill, okay? And then you move on to generate beginnings of stories. And you have a certain time, and you generate several beginnings of stories. So you see this is a divergent component. Of course, you and GLIPS will decide what's the best beginning to keep, finally. And for ending your story, we say, for example, there's 3 ideas that you must use in the ending of your story. And so the 3 ideas are candy, something like gourmandise, you know, great dessert item, and a muffin, and then you're going to choose one more thing that you have to put in to the end of your story, the choice you make will be more or less a rare choice based on what other kids choose. GLIPS will discuss it with you. You'll debate it. You'll collaborate. GLIPS will make a counter suggestion. And then you will generate your ends of stories. And at the end, we'll be able to show the whole story that you've generated. And so this is our more complex story task where you have collaboration elements. You can do this task also individually without GLIPS. It's possible too. And so just to finish, here we're considering creative potential as a complex thing, several ingredients entering the process. We are working on efficient ways to massively be able to assess this and automatize the scoring. And this will help us to track it in educational systems or give feedback at the personal level. And so you see the kind of basic model that we're running on. Voila.
Thank you.
Yeah.